The Las Vegas Raiders have made a significant move by releasing Gardner Minshew and Andre James. However, the release of Minshew wasn't the usual procedure. Instead of just parting ways with him, the Raiders released Minshew with a failed physical designation, meaning that he didn't pass a physical exam due to health issues. This has led to some interesting discussions. Could the Raiders save the $7.6 million owed to Minshew in the upcoming season due to his failed physical? When Minshew was signed last year, the Raiders guaranteed him $7.6 million for this season. But now that he's been tagged with this designation, there are questions about whether the team could avoid paying him. Unfortunately, the answer is no. The Raiders are still on the hook for that amount. The $7.6 million will count as dead cap space, meaning it counts against the team's salary cap but doesn't contribute to their roster. This situation has also led to a broader discussion about the Raiders' cap space management. Currently, the team has $44 million in dead money, which is a significant amount. Dead money comes from contracts that were poorly managed in the past, including bad contracts and unfulfilled agreements. This hefty amount of dead money means that the Raiders essentially have $44 million less to spend on players this season. This could have been used to bring back players like Trayvon Mullen or Robert Spain, who could have been valuable additions to the team. It's a reminder of how mismanaged contracts can hinder a team's ability to make moves. As for Minshew, the fact that he was released with a failed physical means that any team interested in signing him will have to consider his health. If Minshew can't pass a physical with another team, he might not get signed at all. If that happens, the NFL will continue to support Minshew, paying him for the upcoming season and helping with his medical expenses due to the Raiders' decision. This could offer some relief to Minshew, but it won't drastically change the Raiders' cap situation. Despite the drama surrounding Minshew's release, the Raiders still have $47.5 million in cap space to work with. However, when considering the $44 million in dead money, the Raiders' cap situation could have been much better if their financial management had been more effective. The addition of players like Jeremy Chinn, who signed for a $6 million cap hit, shows that the team is making some moves, but the cap space issues are still very real. Now, the Raiders will need to focus on managing their cap space wisely in order to strengthen their team and make the most of what they have left to spend. Trayvon Merrick, who was earning $17 million a year, has now been replaced by Jeremy Chinn, whose cap hit is much lower at $6.6 million for this season. This shift can be seen as a positive for the Raiders, as Chinn, while different in style, is still a solid player at a fraction of the cost. While Merrick may have been a better player overall, Chinn's lower cap hit provides the team with some much-needed flexibility and savings, totaling $11 million less than Merrick's deal. Another important move for the Raiders involves Alex Cappa, whose cap hit for this year stands at $5 million. The beauty of this contract is that it's a one-year deal, meaning the Raiders have the flexibility to move on from Cappa next year with little financial impact. Only $3.5 million is guaranteed, and if Cappa doesn't perform as expected, the Raiders can release him without losing much. This signing indicates that the Raiders are likely planning for the future by addressing their offensive line without making a long-term commitment right away. The team may need to add more depth at guard or right tackle, but bringing in Cappa seems like a low-risk, high-reward move for the time being. Jordan Meredith was also signed to a $1 million contract. This is a backup role where Meredith, who has experience as a center and can play both guard positions, is expected to provide depth. While the Raiders are likely considering Meredith as a backup, his versatility could make him a useful piece on the offensive line. However, the expectation is that Alex Cappa will be the starting guard, unless someone like Dylan Parham proves to be a better fit for the job. The Raiders are also dealing with Geno Smith's cap hit, which currently stands at $31 million. This amount includes the trade cost of acquiring him. Although some may have reported a lower number, it's clear that Smith's contract is substantial. The Raiders are likely working on an extension for him, which will impact the cap hit. Smith is expected to sign a new deal in the coming weeks, likely ranging between $40 million and $45 million. As with previous contracts, there's a possibility that the Raiders will front-load this deal to gain cap relief in future seasons, similar to how they structured Max Crosby's contract. The Raiders are in a relatively good position with their cap space, having $47.5 million to work with, but they also have several players with cap hits that will need to be managed carefully. For example, Jakobi Meyers, whose contract is in its final year, will count $14.9 million against the cap. If he performs well, his next deal could be even more lucrative. Meanwhile, players like Adam Butler, Jack Jones, and Isaiah Pola-Mao will need to prove themselves to justify their cap hits of $3.8 million, $3.4 million, and $3.5 million, respectively. Looking ahead, the Raiders have several positions to target in free agency or the draft. Wide receiver is one area of need, and while some believe the team could find a solid option in the draft, the uncertainty around prospects like Tyro McMillan makes the wide receiver position worth considering in free agency as well. McMillan's draft stock has been fluctuating, and while he may still be a top choice for the Raiders, there's no guarantee he'll be available or worth the investment. Teams have started to question his draft position, with some analysts projecting him lower than initially expected. One interesting name that's been linked to the Raiders is Cooper Kupp, a proven wide receiver who could provide an immediate impact. If the Raiders want to strengthen their receiving core, Kupp would be a significant addition. However, it remains to be seen if the team will pursue him or other free agent wide receivers as the draft approaches. The decision will likely depend on how the team evaluates the draft class and whether they believe they can find a reliable option at receiver without breaking the bank in free agency. Cooper Kupp is an intriguing option for the Raiders, as he can play as a true X-receiver, providing a dynamic presence on the outside. While he has shown he can beat man coverage in the past, it's important to consider his age. He's 32 years old, and what kind of contract he'll demand. His versatility, including the ability to play in the slot, makes him a valuable weapon, but the Raiders will have to weigh whether his cap hit and expected salary fit into their plans for the future. That said, Kupp still has plenty of ability, and he could certainly make an impact for the Raiders if they choose to pursue him. Another strong consideration would be Keenan Allen, who, at 32 years old, remains a reliable receiver. Despite his age, he can still separate from defenders and is a proven player who can excel in 50-50 ball situations, something Geno Smith excels at. Allen could be a more expensive option at around $22 million, but he would provide a solid, experienced X-receiver who can immediately help the Raiders' offense. If the Raiders can balance the cap space and use their $47 million wisely, Allen could be a key piece moving forward. The question for the Raiders is whether they prioritize getting a wide receiver through free agency or via the draft. If the team enters the draft needing a receiver, they could be forced to take a wide out early, potentially reaching for someone like McMillan, but the uncertainty surrounding his draft stock could make this risky. Entering the draft without a glaring need for a wide receiver would give the Raiders the flexibility to take the best player available, whether that's someone like Travis Hunter, Will Johnson, or Ashton Jeanty. Amari Cooper, who has been linked to the Raiders before, is another option. While some fans have criticized Cooper's attitude or demeanor, he remains a very effective wide receiver. His ability to stretch the field and perform as a true X makes him a valuable asset, and if the Raiders are looking for a proven option, Cooper should be considered. Tyler Lockett is another name worth considering. He plays a similar role to Jakobi Meyers as a strong number 2 receiver, but adding Lockett could signal the departure of Meyers. The Raiders will have to weigh if adding Lockett is worth losing a solid contributor like Meyers, who has a reasonable cap hit this year. In addition to wide receivers, the Raiders need to address their offensive line, particularly at guard. The guard market is currently booming, with some excellent players available. Tevin Jenkins, for instance, is an intriguing option. If healthy, Jenkins has the potential to be one of the top guards in the NFL. He has experience at both right and left guard, and his versatility is a valuable trait. With a $44 million cap space, the Raiders could potentially afford to sign Jenkins to a deal worth $12 to $14 million a year, which would significantly upgrade their offensive line. Tevin Jenkins could form a dominant duo with Jackson Powers-Johnson, creating a formidable presence on the offensive line. The Raiders have a chance to build a top-tier line with Jenkins and Crosby working together, which would have an enormous impact on the offense. Jenkins has a ton of upside, and if he stays healthy, he could be a game-changer for the Raiders. Of course, there are other guard options available, such as Brandon Scherff and Shaq Mason, who could be more affordable, although they may be a bit older. These are still proven players who could contribute significantly to the team's line, and much like Richie Incognito was able to do in his later years, they could provide solid play at a reasonable cost. Overall, the Raiders need to carefully consider their cap space and the best way to use it. Adding a top-tier wide receiver like Kupp, Allen, or Cooper could help elevate the offense, while a solid guard signing like Tevin Jenkins could solidify the offensive line and provide the protection needed to succeed. The team has a lot of flexibility with their $47 million in cap space, but making the right moves now will determine their success in the coming seasons. The Raiders have an important decision to make regarding which positions to prioritize in free agency. For the offensive line, if the team can bring in a veteran guard for a 1 or 2 year deal in the $6 to $8 million range, it could be a solid move without committing to long-term contracts. Players like Tevin Jenkins, Dalton Risner, and others could fit into the team's plans. Jenkins in particular has a ton of upside, although his injury history is a concern. Risner is a solid player, but there might be reasons other teams aren't eager to sign him, which raises some red flags. Mekhi Becton is another name to consider, though there are concerns about his ability to transition well to a new team. His size and physicality are unquestionable, but his struggles with speed and consistency against defenders could be an issue. He has been great with the Eagles due to their elite offensive line, so the question becomes whether that success can be replicated with the Raiders' line, which might not have the same elite talent surrounding him. As for the money side of things, the Raiders should be cautious about overpaying for any of these guards. A contract in the range of $12 to $13 million would be reasonable for Jenkins, Risner, or even Becton, but paying someone $18 to $19 million would be overkill. The Raiders need to keep their cap space in mind and make smart investments. On the defensive side, inside linebacker is a position the Raiders should seriously consider addressing. With the loss of Robert Spillane and Divine Diablo, the team could use another veteran to step in. The top target in this position would likely be C.J. Mosley. Mosley has been a standout linebacker with the New York Jets under Robert Saleh and could be a strong addition to the Raiders' defense. However, Mosley's expected cost of $10 to $12 million might be a bit much, especially when there are other viable options available. Devondre Campbell, Eric Kendricks, and Zach Cunningham are all solid alternatives. Campbell has potential and has been effective in the past, while Kendricks, though older, has experience in a similar defensive scheme. Zach Cunningham has also shown promise at times. If the Raiders are looking for a lower-cost option, Nathan Landman from the Atlanta Falcons could be an intriguing target. Landman is a strong tackler and a great run defender with good instincts. While not as physical as someone like Spillane, Landman has the potential to develop into a solid player, especially if he can be molded in the Raiders' defensive scheme. At just 26 years old, he still has time to grow and could be a nice value option for the team. In summary, the Raiders need to be strategic with their free agent spending. They have a decent amount of cap space, but the goal should be to add value without overcommitting to long-term contracts. The priority should be a guard, followed by a wide receiver, and then possibly a linebacker. The next few days in free agency are crucial for the Raiders to secure some solid value signings.